Welcome to Wireless LAN Weekly, a podcast focused on the wireless networking professional. We aim to educate, inform, entertain, and inspire. Get ready to listen and enjoy. Now to our host of the show, Keith Parsons.
Welcome back to episode 20 of Wireless LAN Weekly. This week's podcast is going to be centered on the Apple iPad, comparing the Wi-Fi iPad versus the 3G iPad. Again, it's a Memorial Day weekend, and so this is just going to be a short podcast for the week on just this one topic. Now, let's get on with the show.
Rant, pet peeve, what really bugs you? 60 seconds of complaining starts now.
I have one little pet peeve, and that is concerned with a saying that has become pretty popular over the years. And the saying goes like this: those who can do and those who can't teach. My problem with that is I'm a teacher, and I also consider myself to be a pretty fair networking engineer. And I kind of take a little bit of exception to that, mainly because there's a perception that that's true. And one of the things that I would like to say here is that, in my opinion, the best instructors are the ones who have got a background in the applied sciences, the ones who have actually been out in the field and who have implemented networks or whatever the issue that they're discussing would have to do with. And so I would say that an instructor who has experience and the ability to take the theory behind a technology and then to present that to a group who's trying to learn it is someone who can give you the best presentation and the best opportunity to transfer knowledge.
Things every wireless LAN professional needs to know. Gear up, buckle down, and stand by for the real techie stuff.
Well, on with the show, and here we go with episode 20 of Wireless LAN Weekly, and this is the show about Wi-Fi iPads versus 3G iPads. Well, first, in previous episodes, I had talked about iPads and how I got one originally, and how we then did some results looking at spectrum analysis and packet level analysis on the Wi-Fi iPad. Lately, I've also picked up a 3G iPad, and so now we can do some comparisons between the iPads themselves. So we'll be comparing RF, Bluetooth, and Wi-Fi between the Apple Wi-Fi iPad and the 3G iPad. If you want to check out those previous posts, just the pretty link is WLANpros.com/iPad1 and /iPad2, and this episode you can find again at WLANpros.com/iPad3. So first, the devices we used in the test. I put together the following items in my hotel room just a couple nights ago. And here's what we had. First was the iPhone 3GS. And if you look in the show notes, you can see its MAC address, a Wi-Fi iPad, the original Wi-Fi iPad, and then a 3G iPad, and that's the new version of the iPad that has a little black strip on top. It's a little plastic strip that allows for the 3G antenna as well as the GPS antenna. And then the next client side was a MacBook Pro 13-inch, and this MacBook Pro has obviously an ABG-N 2.4 and 5 gig chipset in it. And what I was running for the access point in this case to get it to go out to the internet was a little portable device from Sprint called Overdrive. It takes 3G, 4G signals and sends it out wirelessly over Wi-Fi. And so those are the devices we used in the test. I also used an Apple Airport Extreme so we can look and see how the iPads and the iPhone as well as the MacBook could compare when they're announcing themselves on the probe request frames, and we're going to take a look at some of those. So the first test we're looking for was a Bluetooth signal strength test. And in this analysis, I compared the results of each portable station device, had them all go into broadcast discovery mode. And when Bluetooth's in discovery mode, it leaves a certain signature, fairly even on the top, and so I used a averaging mechanism to average out and find out what each of them look like. Each device was held the same exact distance from an air magnet spectrum analyzer. It's the kind that was using a Cogneo chipset. Well, in the signal test, the average Bluetooth signal came in as follows. The iPhone 3GS came in as the winner with a neg 48 dBm. The Wi-Fi iPad was a neg 50, and amazingly, the 3G iPad came in at a neg 52. I ran these tests 3 to 4 times each and came up with the average on there, and kind of a little shocking. I thought the 3G would have been stronger. It was actually a little slightly weaker than the Wi-Fi iPad. If you look in the show notes, you can see the actual sample snapshots that came from those exact tests. Now, this test has a lot of variables, but it's still a fairly effective way of testing the RSSI of each device when we can't actually attach directly to the antenna. Not a bad thing. If I had used a jig or something to put them on exactly the right distance, it might have changed the signals slightly, but it's pretty close and kind of close to the results I had when I ran just the Wi-Fi iPad alone by itself. In the next test was running 802.11 signal strength. Now, for 802.11 signal strength, I used an air magnet Wi-Fi NIC with the air magnet Wi-Fi analyzer, and then used the reported RSSI from each device in dBm. As expected, the AP came in fairly strong. I mean, you'd expect your APs to be really strong. And being as close as I was, I had assumed it was going to be strong. But what amazed me was the MacBook Pro was actually slightly stronger than the AP itself. So from the same distance to the client NIC that was in the air magnet machine, the Sprint Overdrive AP came in at neg 36. The MacBook Pro itself came in neg 32. Again, same distance. The MacBook Pro is slightly louder than the AP itself. And then they came in with the exact same order that we had before. The iPhone 3GS came in at neg 40. The Wi-Fi iPad was a 10 dB lower at neg 50, and then the 3G iPad was just 2 dB lower again at neg 52. So just with our first two tests, it looks like the Wi-Fi iPad is actually beating out the 3G iPad in the signal strength tests. The next test was, again, using the Wi-Fi analyzer from Air Magnet, and looking in at the decodes to see what parameters are specifically supported and not supported. Both the Wi-Fi iPad and the 3G iPad supported the same 802.11n capabilities. When you look in there, you can see that their SM power save mode is turned on, that they have a MSDU of 7935 octets, and that they support 40 megahertz wide CCK and DSS in the 40 megahertz wide mode. Both of them are MCS index 7, which means they're a one-by-one kind of a system, and they support data rates, all the data rates that would be supported by a normal MCS 7. Through some further detailed look, we can look down and see that there's other N features, a bunch of higher level N features that might have been supported, but when we look at the decode, that none of the extra features that are built in or could be built in as optional into 802.11n devices are turned on these iPads. So both iPads support the same type of N feature sets, and no big difference there. They're both about the same, kind of what you'd expect to get out of an MCS 7 client device, kind of the minimalist N. But like all N devices are better B, G, and A than a B, G, and A by themselves. They have better, quicker, faster chipsets that have been designed using Moore's Law. Every 18 months you double the transistor count on a chip. And so the N chips that Apple's been using these are fairly decent and doing a pretty good job. The next test I went on and did some efficiency analysis. This, again, is a tool in Air Magnet's Wi-Fi analyzer. And I compared the supported data rates, the capabilities of the MacBook compared to the 3G iPad. Obviously, the MacBook Pro far exceeds any of the capacities that the iPad would have. They both have .11 chipsets, but the laptop is a MCS 15 and supports a lot more of the features that are built in. So, as you can see in the graphic that's on the supported show notes, you can see that with the MCS of 15, The maximum physical data rate would be a 144 meg, but with the overhead and if we use the MPDU max size, the best we can possibly hope for a MacBook Pro is around 140. So 140 is about as fast as we're going to get off a MacBook Pro. Using the same comparison, the iPad could only pull in slightly under 65 meg. Again, this is not just basically, totally caused by the fact that the MacBook is a 1x1 .11n system. It only has one radio chain running, and thus we get an MCS of 7, and we're limited by what MCS of 7s do. On to the next analysis piece. I then went on and used 802.11n frame analysis to look and capture the packets of an iPad connecting to an access point. Now, no one's ever really applauded the Apple's wireless stacks. Well, no one's ever applauded many client stacks. Any of you who've been around wireless for a long time, it's, you can do a lot of work on the AP side, but getting in on the client side, that's where most of our trouble is going to be. And I've worked with Laura Chappell in the past, and she's done some extensive analysis of how chatty Apple's stack is. It doesn't have to be as chatty as it is in order to meet the 802.11 spec, but the 802.11 spec still has a whole bunch of parts that in there that are optional that they don't have to follow exactly, and so a lot of clients do it differently. So don't get me started on the whole client firmware and driver thing. All the vendors do some weird stuff. They all meet the specs, but they have little optional bits going along. If we really wanted to fix this, we're going to have to support the new client-side 802.11 subcommittee that's going to allow us to get a little better on the client side. So we looked here, and there's a screen capture and the show notes, so you can see how it went through its probe request, probe response, authentication request, authentication response, and chose an AP, then did the association request and association response. You can see all those listed out. For those of you who are into packet decodes, why don't you go to online, go to the show notes, and scroll down and find the screen that I'm talking to, and tell me whether or not you know the type of authentication and encryption that we're using in this association cycle. Well, on to the conclusions. The conclusions here, well, I purposely picked up a 3G iPad, and the reason I did it was I assumed that the radios would work better than the Wi-Fi. I was very surprised when I tested the two and found that the Wi-Fi actually was slightly better in both Bluetooth and 802.11 signal strength. Now, I would recommend, actually strongly recommend, the 3G version if you have a chance. I think it's like $130 more. Not specifically for the, that little slight 2 dB difference between the Wi-Fi and the 3G. It's actually 2 dB less. But that it has a GPS. With the Wi-Fi iPad, it uses the Wi-Fi triangulation method where it goes out and looks up the MAC addresses of the APs that you can see, and then uses that to figure out where you are. Not terribly accurate, gets you pretty close, but with the 3G version, it has a full-on GPS chipset, and from what tests I did, as I was walking down the street, it could see what side of the sidewalk I was on. Very, very good GPS in there, and there's some great GPS software that's available, some apps that work amazingly well. If you like GPS on those little screens, wait till you see it on a big monster screen that you can run with an iPad. In addition, the 3G has the ability, if you want to add the paid plan, you can get it to connect via 3G. Currently, I'm running my Sprint Overdrive. It allows me to have a 3G, 4G internet access, and then I can share it between all my devices, not just the one thing alone. Supposedly, in the 4.0 version of the OS that's coming out later this summer, we can get tethering on iPhones, but there's a specific list that I saw that said that it will not be allowed to be tethered to an iPad. So thus, I went with the Sprint version because it allows 4G as well as 3G, and it's working for me now. But with the 3G device, I have the ability in the future, if I wanted to and needed to, I could turn on the 3G and get that picked up. So looking forward to the 4.0 version of the OS that's going to come out later this summer, and supposedly they'll have it all available on the iPads as well. I think that Apple's going to come out with some fixes in the new 4.0 for the radio, both for Bluetooth and for Wi-Fi. The chip, and then we all know how much the firmware and the algorithms they use change how the device actually does its little bits. So one thing, Apple's already sold, and by the time I'm posting this, early in May 2010, there's over 2 million iPads have sold. They're selling more than 1 million a month. That is a very large pool of beta testers. And so now that they get this extended beta test from all of these users, I think they'll be able to much better refine their firmware and algorithms, and 802.11 is going to work a lot better in the future. Personally, I haven't had any problem at all with either of my iPads going to Wi-Fi signals and drop signals. But then again, I've always been following the recommendations Apple has had, having a separate SSID for 2.4 versus 5 gig, and keeping things pretty much separate and clean. I have noticed on my iPads that obviously, as we all know, the 2.4 gig signals travel further and better through materials in your house, in your offices, wherever, than the 5 gig does. So I do see stronger signals with the 2.4, and yet the 5 gigs works fine for me in many locations. My office, my home, hotels, I've been on 5 gig quite a bit. Well, after weeks and weeks of testing, I got the first iPad the Saturday before Easter, and now it's Memorial Day. I had enough time to play with these. I'm even more impressed with the technology than I was when I first saw the first iPad demo by Steve Jobs. One easy way to sum up, and this isn't mine, I've heard this from a variety of people, but I agree. A way to sum up my iPad experience is every time I've heard anyone complain about the iPad, amazing, they don't actually own one. They might say it doesn't support Flash, it doesn't support this, doesn't support that, doesn't do this, doesn't have a keyboard, all these things that they don't like, and yet they don't actually own one. Everyone I know who actually owns an iPad, they're just totally enamored with it. They love the product and they use it more than they ever would have expected. My 75-year-old father, who is a great-grandfather himself, saw mine, went out the next day and bought his, and just this last weekend when he was over, had mentioned that in fact, his quote was, "I'm never going back to paper again." He just loves his iPad and what it does for him and how he keeps everything in one location, his calendar, his contacts, his email, his browsing. And for what he uses a computer for, most of which that he needs is with him in his iPad. It's amazing technology. And so I'm personally not going to replace any of my laptops with an iPad. It's not going to happen real soon, but it does make a fantastic lightweight addition to the technology I carry around with me. It is fantastic for the consumption of media, from watching TV shows to playing games to having an entire technical PDF library of all of the vendor materials that I've been collecting over the years in PDF format. They all sit on my iPad. They're all zoomable. I get to stay up on RSS feeds. I use it to watch the news, read the news, and it totally replaces my Kindle. It out-Kindles the Kindle hands down. So if you're looking for a portable media consumption device, this is the one to look for. I can't recommend an iPad any greater. Now, what I am waiting for, however, is Apple's next developer code to support Wi-Fi analysis. A couple months ago, Apple, banned all Wi-Fi scanner apps that are run on the iPhone. Now, if you've already purchased one for your iPhone, it will continue to work fine. You can transfer it and it runs fine on your iPad. If you haven't purchased one, you don't have access to them directly. So you're going to have to wait until the fix happens. I have my fingers crossed. I'm hoping a lot, because as soon as they release the ability to have Wi-Fi direct analysis on an iPad, this is going to be a fantastic tool for all wireless LAN professionals. The platform is phenomenal. At the bottom of the show notes, I've included a bunch of graphics of some Wi-Fi apps that I have for my iPhone that I've ported over and run on the iPad. They work great. They work fine. With the new N chipset in the iPad, we'll also be able to get 5 gig and N analysis. So I'm looking forward to those new changes. And I think you ought to look at looking into an iPad as a nice additional tool in your arsenal. One final thing I use it for, both in class and on site, is it's a great extra little client. You need a client to go and touch something and try something out. Your iPad's right there, easy to do. both to hit web pages, to hit email pages, download music, watch videos, any of those things. You can use it as a nice portable test tool. We started out with the Wi-Fi iPad versus the 3G iPad. The Wi-Fi is slightly better, about 2 dB higher from what I've collected on my analysis. But the 3G has some additional features that you might want to look into. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Elevator speech. Our guests have just 2 minutes to tell us all about their product or service offering. Ready, set, go.
Hi, my name is Elaine Rogers. My company is called CFIN Coaching. And we already heard in episode 3 of the podcast where the name CFIN comes from. I'm a personal and business coach, and I work with people who want to improve aspects of their lives, such as relationships, life-work balance, weight loss, finance, etc., etc. As a business coach, I help people heighten their self-awareness so that they can equip themselves with the relevant tools to increase confidence, improve their managerial and interpersonal skills, improve productivity, and lower stress levels. That's always a good one. I would offer free intake sessions normally, and then I work closely with the client to design their own program for further development, working on their potential beyond their comfort zone. I'm a great believer in pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone. As a coach, I assure 100% commitment to assisting people when they're prioritizing their goals and really making time for the important things in their lives. I'm also a corporate business coach and trainer of IT management and business skills. We covered communication skills in episode 3, so please feel free to check back there and have a listen if you haven't done so already. That was all about engaging with the customer. And we talked about the first thing that was involved there in communication was listening. So if you'd like to find out more about me or more about coaching in general, please visit www.cfincoaching.com.
Well, thanks for listening to this week's episode 20 of Wireless LAN Weekly, where we talked about the differences between an iPad, iPhone, MacBook Pro, and the 3G and the Wi-Fi iPads. Stay tuned next week. We'll have a new episode with new and more information. So thanks for showing up and listening. We'll see you next week.
Wireless LAN Weekly, a podcast focused on the needs of wireless LAN professionals. We look forward to your feedback. Please leave your comments at the bottom of the show notes, or email feedback on the show can be sent to feedback@wirelesslanprofessionals.com. If you'd like to leave a voicemail feedback, just call 24/7 and leave a message at 1-801-481-9018. Until next time, this has been another production of wirelesslanprofessionals.com, a place to educate, inform, entertain, and inspire.